Do you ever wonder why either yourself or someone you know tends to be overly distrustful or jealous of their partner in their relationships? Or maybe you've struggled to connect in your relationships, or you have a really hard time with intimacy and just get that ick factor whenever someone gets too emotionally close to you. If that's the case, chances are you may have an insecure attachment style. My name is Ramsey Dean, and I'm a clinical social worker, and in today's video, I'm going to outline the 4 main attachment styles that shape the way you connect with others in relationships. I am also going to discuss how these attachment styles develop based off the different experiences you might have had with your parents growing up. If you're interested in learning about how your attachment style could be impacting your relationships, then keep on watching. The first attachment style I want to cover is called secure attachment. This is the quote-unquote healthy attachment style. People with secure attachment are able to be committed to their relationships and their partners, but also maintain a balance of their own independence. So people with secure attachment are not going to be overly clingy. They're not going to be trying to read between the lines all the time when it comes to their partner's behavior. They're generally speaking going to feel secure and not be worried all the time that their partner is going to leave them or harm them. And on the flip side, people with secure attachment also aren't like fiercely independent and that they still value their relationship. They're still attentive towards their partner and affectionate and accepting. People with secure attachment are also comfortable handling and resolving conflict with their partner, meaning that if something contentious comes up, they feel comfortable enough to talk through the problem and figure it out without either becoming hostile or aggressive. Or on the flip side, just avoiding the difficult conversations altogether and just going with the flow for the sake of not wanting to deal with conflict. In short, people with secure attachment generally have healthy relationships with good intimacy, communication, and autonomy. They're able to express their needs well, trust their partners, and they find their relationships fulfilling. So how do we develop secure attachment? Typically, we get it from our parents during our childhood, and that's going to be the case with all of the attachment styles I'm going to talk about. When we have secure attachment, our parents made us feel safe and protected around them when we were young. They protected us from danger, allowed us to explore the world, our surroundings, and they intervened when they needed to in order to keep us safe. Think of a toddler. Hopefully the parent is going to be making sure they don't stick things in outlets or swallow small objects that could be a choking hazard. And as our parents keep us safe, both physically and emotionally safe, or don't, which we're going to talk about more in a minute, we start developing our view of other people in the world and whether or not we perceive that as safe. People with secure attachment had parents who acknowledged their emotions. So if the child is distraught or crying, the parent helps soothe and bring them back to a calm, regulated emotional state. Think of rocking and cooing a baby, cuddling a small child who's distraught, comforting a teenager that's experiencing bullying, those types of things. People with secure attachment usually had parents who celebrated who the child was and made them feel valued. So if the child has certain interests or personality quirks, talents, etc., the parents fostered those and built the child up as opposed to making them feel ashamed for who they are. So that's secure attachment in a nutshell. Now we are going to move on to the other 3 attachment styles, and these all fall into the category of what we would call insecure attachment, meaning those things I talked about before in childhood with secure attachment, not all of those happened in the way that we were cared for by our parents, and so that has negatively impacted the way we look at and view connection in the context of human relationships. First, let's talk about what's called anxious attachment. People with anxious attachment are chronically worried about their partner's availability and commitment. They may often feel incomplete without their partner and may seek over-the-top reassurance from their partner that everything is okay between them. People with anxious attachment also tend to really struggle with jealousy, and they can be very distrustful of their partner and just the relationship in general. They're constantly worried that their partner is going to leave or reject them in some way. They're always on edge waiting for the other shoe to drop when it comes to their relationships. People with anxious attachment often worry that their partner does not reciprocate the same amount of love, and they are consistently hungry for validation and reassurance in how much their partner loves them. You might also see a lot of sneaky behavior with people who have anxious attachment. So things like sneaking into their partner's phone, reading their text messages, snooping around, invading their partner's privacy. And the reason for this is because people with anxious attachment are worried their partners are going to abandon them. So they're afraid of conflict because they don't want to push too much because they're afraid their partner will leave them if they do. So instead, they resort to other measures to try and keep tabs on how their relationship is going. So in short, people with anxious attachment are clingy, needy, they have high expectations of their partners, and this often scares pushes people away from them. So how does anxious attachment develop in childhood? So remember before when I was talking about how a child with secure attachment is loved and kept safe and nurtured by their parent? Someone with anxious attachment had a parent who did all or many of these things, but it was just inconsistent. The child got mixed signals from their parent. Sometimes I can rely on you and you're gonna keep me safe and you're gonna love me, but then randomly there are gonna be times when I can't rely on you. You're not going to be there for me, and so I'm gonna cling and I'm gonna latch onto you and I'm gonna make sure that you don't leave me. A different parenting style that can also lead to anxious attachment is when the parent is loving and nurturing, but it's done in a way that is intrusive and overbearing and really about the parent satisfying their own unmet emotional needs than actually being about the child. And so it leads that child to feel anxious in the context of their relationship with their parent, and the child then takes this worldview with them into adulthood. Next, let's talk about avoidant attachment. So with anxious attachment, we see clinginess and this irrational fear that your partner is going to leave. With avoidant attachment, it's the opposite. It's almost aloof or emotionally detached. Someone with anxious attachment might seem like they can take or leave their partner, like it doesn't really matter if they stay together or not. People with avoidant attachment are going to be overly rigid. They're not going to want to bend or compromise for their partner. They might be guarded, distant, uncomfortable with emotions. If something bad happens in their life, their first instinct is to keep it a secret and manage it on their own rather than turn to their partner for help and comfort. People with avoidant attachment also have a difficult time expressing their needs and wants in a relationship, and rather than work through the conflict of talking it out, they just want to run away the minute they can't keep things light and surface level. People with avoidant attachment may also be non-committal, so they might have a hesitancy towards putting a formal label on their relationships, moving in with their partner, getting engaged. Those types of things are going to feel really suffocating to someone with avoidant attachment. They may even go as far as to accuse their partner of trying to steal their freedom and being overly distrustful that people are just out to unjustly control them. So how does avoidant attachment develop as a child? With avoidant attachment, typically what we see is the parents were not tolerant of their child's emotions. So let's think of a toddler. They're running around and playing, and they fall and start crying, and they run to their parent. Rather than having a healthy response and picking the child up, cuddling them, soothing them, helping bring the child back to their emotional baseline, with avoidant attachment, the parent will be dismissive. They'll poo-poo it. They'll tell the child to suck it up, to stop crying, stop being a baby, that type of stuff. As the child gets older, if they have a bad day at school, get a bad grade, experience bullying, don't make the sports team they wanted, they're gonna learn that unpleasant emotions are not tolerated by their parent. And as such, they need to figure it out and manage it on their own. And they end up carrying that view into their relationships as an adult. A lot of times these kids will have their instrumental needs met, so things like food, water, clothing, but not their emotional needs. The last attachment style I want to talk about is called anxious-avoidant attachment, or some literature calls it disorganized attachment. Adults with disorganized attachment are going to be both highly anxious and highly avoidant in their relationships. It's this type of chaotic push-pull where they crave emotional intimacy but also want to avoid it at all costs. I love you, I hate you. I need you, no I don't. Touch me, get away from me. You're everything to me, you're nothing to me. I can't get close to you, but don't you dare go to someone else. People with disorganized attachment have a tendency towards emotional extremes. Their relationships tend to be like very volatile roller coaster rides with really big over-the-top highs filled with unhealthy enmeshment and lust combined with really toxic, sometimes even violent lows. People with disorganized attachment have a really hard time maintaining healthy boundaries, and they tend to be prone to high conflict relationships. So how does disorganized attachment develop as a child? This is where trauma typically comes into play. So instead of the parent being a source of safety and protection for the child, with disorganized attachment, the parent was a source of fear. The person who was supposed to provide love and safety instead physically, emotionally, or sexually abused the child. If we think of avoidant attachment, the toddler who fell and was ignored by their parent while crying, with disorganized attachment, the parent is most likely yelling at the child or hitting them or inflicting some type of harm. As the child gets older, their attachment becomes disorganized because the person that they need in order to meet their basic needs is also someone who is very scary and unsafe. So if we think of anxious attachment and the hallmark being fear of abandonment, and with avoidant attachment, the hallmark being unhealthy independence, with disorganized attachment, the child developed both because they are simultaneously anxious anxious about whether or not their parent is going to meet their needs, but also fearful of their parent and wanting to avoid them. They have to walk this difficult tightrope of how can I get enough attention to get my basic needs met, but not too much attention because I don't want to be scared or abused. And as these children become adults, that really difficult tightrope combined with the trauma they've experienced results in disorganized or anxious-avoidant attachment. I truly hope this has been helpful and informative for you, and you've been able to learn something about yourself and perhaps why you are the way you are in your relationships. Or maybe gain some insight into why someone in your life may be anxious or avoidant or disorganized in the way they connect with others. I do want to say, if you're finding that you fall into one of the 3 insecure attachment styles, you're still completely normal. It's actually been estimated that about 40% of people have one of the 3 insecure attachment styles. Now you're probably wondering, so can I change my attachment style? What do I do if I have anxious or avoidant or disorganized attachment? Well, it's kind of up for debate in the psychology field whether or not you can truly change your attachment style. A lot of researchers think once you're an adult, you're always in some ways going to carry those childhood roots with you in the context of your relationships. But what I will say, and what I think, is that you absolutely 100% can learn to fight against your natural tendencies with any of these attachment styles. There are therapists, for example, that specialize in this stuff. Cognitive behavioral therapy and attachment-based therapy in particular both come to mind as treatments where you can learn to fight against these insecure attachment styles. If you think you could benefit from seeing a therapist, I'll link some links down below as to where you can find a licensed therapist in your area. If you got any value out of this video, I would love for you to subscribe to this channel and check out another one of my videos. Catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.